In this video, we will be analyzing Americans experiencing culture shocks in Luxembourg. I've been traveling the world and living abroad for nearly 2 years, so not only will I be comparing Luxembourg to the USA, but I'll also be comparing Luxembourg to all the other countries I've been to.
I have culture shocks about Luxembourg after moving here from Warsaw, Poland. Now, these are not criticisms, just observations. So number one, it's more car-centric. The roads are wider, the parking lots are bigger, and it seems like everyone has a car. Number two, the days are longer in the wintertime. Here it gets dark at 4:30. Meanwhile, in Warsaw, it's already dark by 3:30. So I enjoy that 1 hour of sunlight longer. Number three, they have outdoor shutters on their windows instead of indoor ones and curtains like firanki. Number four, there aren't as many English speakers as I was expecting, so I will definitely be learning French and maybe even German. And the last one, you can smell ham and cheese almost everywhere. It just hits you in the face when you walk into a supermarket. If that's your thing, definitely come to Luxembourg.
In my 2 years of traveling abroad, I have never set foot in Luxembourg. And if I'm being completely honest with you, up until probably 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to point Luxembourg out on a map. I'm saying this to say that I don't really know much about Luxembourg, so all of this is coming as a surprise to me, especially with Luxembourg being car-centric. That's something that I wouldn't have really expected. Now, one thing I do know about Luxembourg is that you people have a lot of money. That's one thing that I am well aware of, is that I believe Luxembourg is actually the wealthiest country on the planet in terms of per capita income, or in terms of some metric that measures wealth. Luxembourg is either very near the top of the list or at the top of the list. So I guess it kind of tracks that more people would just have a car simply because they can afford it. But if I'm not mistaken, public transit is actually free in Luxembourg. And of course, there's always an asterisk next to free because you probably pay for it with your taxes. But I would assume that because public transit is free and probably very reliable and extensive, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, that more people would opt for public transit than using their own cars. Because in my experience in Europe, primarily in the Netherlands, I found that public transit was a lot more convenient than driving. Simply because, for one, it's reliable. Two, it's cheaper, which again, if you're in Luxembourg and you're making a Luxembourgish salary, that might not really be an issue. But also just not having to worry about parking and things like that. But to her point, if the parking lots are bigger, like in the US, for example, then I guess it's not really that much of an issue. But what I want to know is, what types of cars do people in Luxembourg drive? What's the most popular car for most people to get? Are people driving luxurious automobiles, or are they driving more of the typical European hatchbacks? Let me know in the comments below. Now, as far as longer days in the winter, honestly, the sun going down at 4:30 is still kind of crazy to me, coming from where I come from in the USA, because I come from Texas. And in Texas, in the winter, the shortest day of the year, so December 21st, the sun probably goes down at something like 5:30. Maybe 5:15, but probably closer to 5:30. Here in Southeast Asia, I've been to Thailand and Vietnam thus far. I found that the sun kind of consistently goes down at around 5 to 6, maybe 6:30 at the absolute latest in the summer. And I haven't experienced the winter here yet, but I don't think the sun ever goes down before 5 o'clock p.m. in this part of the world. So that was actually a big culture shock I had when going to the Netherlands for the first time, was seeing that, wow, the sun goes down at around 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the winter. Absolutely blew my mind. And then conversely, in the summer, the sun doesn't go down until 9:30 p.m. Seeing a blue sky after 9 p.m., I'm not gonna lie, it tripped me out initially. Now, as far as having fewer English speakers, that's something that I wouldn't have really expected either. I mean, I guess in Luxembourg, it's kind of like Switzerland and Belgium, where you have multiple different languages, at least as far as I'm aware. She mentioned French and German, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, in Luxembourg, you also have a language called Luxembourgish, right? Or is that a variation of German? Let me know in the comments, but I kind of view Luxembourg kind of like Switzerland and Belgium in that regard, where there are multiple national languages, which I always thought was really cool, by the way. And what I want to know is Is it more region specific where, let's say for example in Belgium, you have a very hard and defined boundary where it goes from Flemish speaking to French speaking? Or is it more of a gradient in a spectrum where the vast majority of people within the country can speak both French and German and maybe even Luxembourgish? Because if that's the case, then honestly, yeah, there's really no reason for you to learn English at a very high level because, I mean, you already speak 3 languages. Now, as far as the ham and cheese smell, why? Where does this come from? I'm very confused as to what would be the cause of this. Are there just butcher shops everywhere? Does everyone in Luxembourg eat ham and cheese sandwiches all the time? What does the diet even look like in Luxembourg? Because I can vouch that in the Netherlands, people typically eat a piece of bread with chocolate sprinkles for breakfast, which kind of blew my mind. And then for lunch, a lot of times people will eat a piece of bread with cheese, which also blew my mind, compared to the US where breakfast is usually cereal and milk and lunch is usually a sandwich, maybe fruit, and some sort of snack item like cookies or chips, something like that.
Okay, so I think this trend is hysterical. I'm going to make my list of the things that would send Americans into a coma based on what I've experienced here in Luxembourg with the day-to-day norm. So the first thing that I think would surprise a lot of Americans about Europe in general, but also specifically Luxembourg, eggs and milk are not refrigerated. And that's not a thing in the States at all. You cannot wear workout clothes whenever you want. No leggings and t-shirts to go anywhere. You should probably wear some jeans. The grocery stores are not open on Sunday. And if they are open on Sunday, they probably close at 1. So if you did not plan ahead, you are ordering takeout, which is also hard because a lot of restaurants are closed on Sunday. You may not turn right on red. You may not. It doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. in the middle of the night and the light is red and no cars are coming and it's not changing for a while. You have to wait. You can and will get a speeding ticket for going 4 kilometers over the speed limit, which is about 1.3 miles per hour over the speed limit.
It's my understanding that eggs in Europe are not refrigerated, and in Southeast Asia for that matter. They're not refrigerated because they don't wash off that layer. I don't really know what that layer is called or what it's comprised of, but they don't wash off that outer layer that would then require them to refrigerate the eggs. In the US, they wash off that layer, so I guess they cleanse the outer shell of the egg a little more thoroughly, but then at the same time, I don't think it necessarily lowers the possibility of getting salmonella or whatever else you might get from eating raw eggs. So I don't really know what the point of that is, to be honest, because in my head, I would think that that just lowers the shelf life of the eggs. But I don't know. As far as no workout clothes in public, I'm not gonna lie, I am guilty of doing this. Primarily because I go to the gym every weekday at the very least. So I go to the gym and then right after I finish working out, I'll go and run errands. I'll go grocery shopping, things like that. It makes sense with the way that this area here in Vietnam is set up, where everything is kind of within walking distance and it's all on the first floor of this high-rise building. So it's more practical in that way, but that is something that I noticed in Europe. In every place that I've been to in Europe was that people dressed much better. You can tell that people put a lot more time and thought into their outfits. Now, as far as grocery stores and restaurants being closed on Sundays, that was something that always confused me about other European countries. I didn't really ever experience this being the case in the Netherlands, but it always confused me, the double standard, because people would say grocery stores should be closed on Sundays so that people could spend time with their families, but then they would go and spend time with their families at restaurants which were open on Sundays. Never really made sense to me. So it's nice to see that there's at least not a double standard there. In my opinion, if you're going to close the grocery stores on Sundays, you should close everything on Sundays. You should close every non-essential business on Sundays. So restaurants, movie theaters, all of that. And families can just go to parks or whatever else. But just having grocery stores closed on Sundays so that people can go to restaurants to spend time with their families, where the workers at the restaurants won't have that same opportunity, I feel like that's not really fair. Now, as far as speeding tickets for barely going over the speed limit, I think this has to do with the radar detection system in Europe. Now, I'm making a broad generalization here, but given that they have this in the Netherlands and I believe every other European country I've been to, I'm going to take a wild guess that this is also a thing in Luxembourg, where cops aren't necessarily just waiting on the side of the road in the shadows to pull people over for speeding. They just track your speed with those radars on the side of the road, and they send your ass a ticket through the mail. And that blew my mind going to Europe, because that right there would generate so much revenue in the US that it's honestly baffling. Everybody in the US speeds. Literally everybody, including police officers. But it definitely seems a lot more efficient and effective than just having police officers eating donuts in their cars on the side of the road, waiting behind the on-ramp with their little radar guns, just tracking speed manually. To me, that seems like a waste of resources. So again, Europe, and especially Luxembourg, is living in the future compared to the USA.
In this episode, things I wish I knew before moving to Luxembourg. I got out of work and thought I'd do a little bit of shopping in Humilius. So I got off the tram and guess what? Everything's closed. It is 6:30. 6:30 on a weekday. Great.
So this was actually one of my first initial culture shocks when I arrived in Europe as well, except my experience happened in Spain. Basically, my girlfriend and I wanted to make this Dutch dish known as stamppot. Maybe you've heard of it or tried it. Delicious. And we needed kale for the recipe. So we were going all around Valencia looking for kale, and we went to this market, this big market. If you've been to Valencia, you might know what I'm talking about. And basically, we got there at 2:45 p.m., so I'm thinking we have plenty of time. We get there and almost all of the stalls are closed. I'm like, oh, maybe the market is just now opening. Negative. It was 15 minutes from closing time. It closed at 3 p.m., 3 in the afternoon that day, so 15 o'clock. And it blew my mind because I was like, what if people are at work? I couldn't really wrap my head around it. And honestly, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but this is something that I need an explanation on, because I just struggle to understand the logistics of how this works. Because I get the notion that, yes, retail workers should be able to spend time with their families. I totally get that. As someone who used to work retail myself, I get that. However, what I don't understand is, when do people shop? Because, I mean, if people are at work, and I don't really know what the working hours look like in Luxembourg, but if they're anything like other parts of Europe, people might get out at, I don't know, 4:30? 4:30, they might get off work, and then you have to commute. I mean, unless they're going straight from work directly to the stores, where do you find the time to shop? I never really understood how that dynamic works. I would love to hear more about that in the comments, because nobody has ever really explained it to me in a way that I've truly been able to comprehend. And again, I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing, because there are always the weekends, but I almost feel like at that point, you might as well just only open on the weekends. Because I know that when I worked retail, typically those hours from 9 to 5, which are the typical working hours in the US, again, I don't know what they are in Luxembourg, inform me in the comments below. But from 9 to 5, the store was pretty much dead. And those were some of the easiest shifts to work. From about 5 to 9 or 10, when the store would close, those would be the busiest times. And that's probably when the stores would make the vast majority of their profits. So I almost feel like it would be unprofitable to run a store concurrent to traditional working hours. But again, there must be something I'm missing, because clearly it's working in European countries like Luxembourg. So again, please explain this to me in a way that I can truly comprehend in the comments below.